With that being said, let's go ahead and roll into our lead story of the day. And folks, it is a doozy. This is one you need. A nice little pick-me-up of watching Don Lemon of CNN just completely get shellacked right upside the head regarding reparations. I mean, he gets destroyed. He gets eviscerated by this royal British commentator. And I mean, if you want to talk about spinning something on the progressive left, reparations is where to do it. And they've been talking about this for decades in America. I mean, heck, more than decades, to be quite frank. They've been talking about it ever since slavery is pretty much abolished. They were looking for reparations. And look, we tried it. The Republicans tried it, and it didn't go through. Why didn't it go through? There was a party that didn't want it to happen. What was it called? Oh, it's called the Democrat Party. That's what it was. Yes. So hundreds of years later, they're asking for a handout, of which are there people that are feeling the effects of slavery? Yes, there are. But there's some people that were never enslaved. Their family was never enslaved, never happened, but they're still asking for handouts and reparations, which is mind-boggling. So ever since Queen Elizabeth passed away, you have MSNBC, CNN, these leftist progressive media outlets going after the British crown, the royals, and requesting, and in other places also demanding that they pay reparations to the colonies and also those that are descendants of slaves. Anybody and everybody that can get their hands on the money, they're basically asking for the British royal crown, the monarchy, the empire to pay out these reparations. And folks, if you want a little pick-me-up on this morning, it's hump day, it's Wednesday, this is the video for it. Because like I said, Don Lemon, when I say left speechless, literally doesn't know what to say after she's done talking. Let's go ahead and roll this one.
Well, this is coming when, you know, there's all of this wealth and you hear about it comes as England is facing rising costs of living, a living crisis, austerity budget cuts, and so on. And then you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, you know, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are, you know, you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say, who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages? Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hilary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll continue.
So he doesn't say anything else after. He goes on a whole different segment. He's not talking about reparations anymore. What a spin. I mean, this is one of the greatest spins I've ever seen. Because look, I'm not for reparations. That time is long and gone. There was an opportunity for it. Does it suck? Yes. I think reparations should have been put through at that present time when slavery was abolished. The conversation should have been had and it should have been implemented. But like I said, Democrats didn't want to go through with it. Oddly enough, now they want to push through it and have present day people pay for the injustices of those in the past. It doesn't work like that. I didn't enslave anybody. I don't want slavery. I don't like it. I think it's evil. But I shouldn't have to pay with my tax dollars somebody else's injustices that happened hundreds and sometimes even thousands of years ago, depending on which historical period you want to talk about. And I love how she spins and goes, look, let's start a supply chain issue. Who was sitting here wheeling and dealing all these people? Oh, it was African Americans. So I love this spin. And you know what? It just shows how bad Jen Psaki was at her job. And don't even get me started with Karine Jean-Pierre on her spinning and just blatant lying and just reading out of a notebook. This lady here is doing a fabulous job. I mean, I haven't seen somebody spin something like this against the progressive left since Kayleigh McEnany was in the White House as the White House press secretary. So kudos to this lady. And quite frankly, too, it's really an argument that I haven't heard before. And I've heard a lot of freaking arguments. I love doing this. I love politics. I love hearing the progressive left's idea, the right side's ideas, and kind of seeing which ones work, which ones are the best. I haven't seen anybody come up with this one where it's like, let's look at the supply chain issue. Let's go after those that kind of started it. Let's go after those that were supplying everybody with slaves. It was black people supplying black people with slaves, or at least not supplying necessarily, but selling black people, blacks selling blacks. And there's also white people that are enslaved as well. So this whole idea that it was just black people, blaming it on England, blaming it on America, everybody had slaves at the time, but they always want to go for that handout. And look, again, I can't emphasize this enough. There are people that are feeling the effects of slavery today. But what I have this open-ended question with is it so much the oppression that happened in the past and you're feeling the dramatic effects today, or is more the dramatic effects your personal financial behavior? I tend to believe that it only takes one generation to fork your family tree. There's a lot of sacrifice involved with it, but a lot of people have done it in America. Both immigrants and both people that are immigrants and oppressed at the same time were able to fork their family tree in one generation by making good financial decisions and sacrificing. So my question is that why are there people that are feeling the effects of slavery and Jim Crow today not able in one generation to fork their family tree and are asking for reparations? Again, is it so much the oppression that happened in the past and the suppression, or is it more the financial behavior that they're making today? The reason why I bring it up is because we just had a lot of handouts given out called the student loan debt forgiveness by Joe Biden. And that's only going to last 5 years. What they expect is seeing that $1.7 trillion in student loans repeat itself and come back to fruition once again in roughly 5 years, meaning the financial behavior of individuals is not going to change. So just because you give people money doesn't mean that they're going to make good decisions with that money. We saw that with the COVID-19 stimulus checks. So once again, I personally don't believe reparations is going to do anything. And furthermore, as a math teacher, I have no idea the calculation and the amount of variables that you can go into in terms of how much money some families should receive. Were some families more oppressed than other people? Did some families work on the plantations longer than others versus others, which would affect the monetary gains they would have had that could be extrapolated into capital gains and investment opportunities? Like, how do you calculate all that? Or are we just giving everybody a lump sum? Because that's kind of screwed up. There's diversity within slaves as well, too, right? Like I said, there's some people that are enslaved longer. There's some people that receive their freedom earlier than others. So what's the distribution? What's the calculation on that? But we can't have that conversation because, oh, it's too messed up, or, oh, you're thinking too far into it. Just give people the money. Well, if we're going to give people money, we should give people the money the right way, right? We should look at these calculations, but government never wants to do that. The Democrats don't want to do that. Why? Because it's somebody else's money. And whenever it's somebody else's money, then no longer do we want to do these calculations. No longer do we want to look at the variables. No longer do we actually want to see where and when and who this money is going to, because again, it's always somebody else's money that's paying for these handout, i.e. COVID-19 stimulus checks. Not everybody should have got one. We should have done the calculation. For those that lost their jobs, should apply for the checks. Those that still had their jobs, maybe shouldn't have gotten the checks. A $600 check's not going to pay for your rent in some areas. You can go endlessly with this conversation and make that analogy connection to reparations. So I think my point has come across here. And for those that are avid viewers of the Bald Brad Show, we've been talking about reparations for quite some time. I think y'all know my viewpoint on it. I'm not for it at all. Again, I think it is wrong for having people like us today who don't like slavery. We don't like racism. We think it's evil. Can't be any more clear than that. But I didn't do anything wrong. The people living today didn't do anything wrong, and they should not have to pay for the injustices of those in the past. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.